Niners, who waxed them last year 42-10. Purdy's squad is still favored by 4, even though he's missing several players, and Debo still recovering from an illness. Now, a loss would drop San Fran to 3-5, Brew. Is there more pressure on Purdy or Shanahan?
Well, you see there who I assume Kittle will play. Who Debo, I'm guessing
Kittle's going to play.
Yeah, Kittle will, but Jennings and Debo, who knows? Yep. Here's the other guys, though, and these guys have been out, but Javon Hargrave.
Well, he's
defense.
out for the year.
Yeah. Dre Greenlaw.
He hasn't come back from the Super Bowl.
Hufunga.
He came back and then got hurt again.
Right. So they're missing not just those guys offensively, Ayuk and McCaffrey, I didn't even mention, but all these other guys. Honestly, you could argue the Cowboys should win this game. And so I don't think there's a lot of pressure, hear me out, on Shanahan or Purdy. But if of the two I had to pick, I'd say Purdy, because Purdy doesn't have the bag. Like, Shanahan's got the security, and that's fine. He's earned it. But Purdy, as good as he's been, does not yet have the bag. And if he looks terrible again, and then again, like, let's just keep it on the Cowboys game. If he plays a bad game, a horrible game, he had 3 interceptions, obviously, last week against the Chiefs. If he does something similar again, then now you already have Nick and some others who are like, does he deserve that money? That's just going to start getting louder. I don't think he has to be phenomenal. I don't think he has to throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns and lead them to victory. I think he has to play pretty well. He may even be able to withstand a loss.
Sure.
But play pretty well, and that should be enough. But because he doesn't have the money, he is under the most pressure. And some people still have questions about it.
Well, there are certainly, our show is a unique one because of Wild's, I think, potential Kyle Shanahan opinion. But Shanahan is mostly universally accepted as a great coach.
I think he's a great coach.
He just hasn't been able to win the
right, but so just
and
to be fair to Kyle Shanahan, since he took over the San Francisco 49ers, there's 3 guys coaching who have won a Super Bowl. Andy Reid, Sean McVay, and Doug Peterson, who's on his 2nd job and might be on the way out. The active coaches who have won a Super Bowl, there's 7. 4 of them, though, won their Super Bowl more than a decade ago, more than a half decade before Kyle got his start as a head coach. Because you have Sean Payton, Mike McCarthy, Tomlin, and John Harbaugh. That's all pre-2013. Shanahan got the job in 2017. Since Kyle Shanahan became a head coach, by any metric, he's one of the very best. And the stuff Wilds, I think, bangs him on a bit, the not getting over the hump. Well, I mean, he's 2nd in all the playoff stuff to Andy Reid. And so I think this is unquestionably Purdy, and I'm not really focusing just specifically on the Cowboys game. It's kind of the pressure on this season for them because, like you're saying, Brew, the Niners, it's not like if they don't pay Purdy this offseason, they're moving on from him.
Right.
They have him for
you don't have to pay.
Of course. So, and it's not even because they could franchise tag him. He has 1 more year on his contract for $1 million. Like, they've got all the time they want with him. I think Purdy, while I might be on the more skeptical edge, I think there is a good bucket of people, even in that Tiers article that you reference all the time, who are people that are, okay, he's good, but he's, league average-ish. And I think Shanahan is almost universally accepted as top 5 coach in this league. And I think if Shanahan were to come available, there's 20 teams that would move on from their coach for him. I don't think there's 20 teams that would move on from their quarterback for Purdy. So I just think one guy is minted and the other guy is approaching that status.
Okay, so let's talk about this, because I think there's a lot of truth, but I also think that there's a lot wrong as well. And so this is going to be interesting. This is going to be, a little bit more difficult to parse out because, yes, I think what Shanahan has been able to do, despite having essentially a bona fide all-time great quarterback, is really impressive, right? It's very similar to what Andy Reid was able to do when he had, like, Donovan McNabb, quite frankly. Who's not a Hall of Famer. And I've talked about this at length. Like, majority of Super Bowls, the vast majority, like 70-80%, are won by Hall of Fame coaches and Hall of Fame quarterbacks. You need to have a truly great quarterback to win some Super Bowls. And so the fact that he was able to get to the Super Bowl and almost beat Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid with Jimmy Garoppolo, that's really, 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 really impressive. And the fact that he was able to almost win the Super Bowl with Brock Purdy, not saying that Brock Purdy's a bad quarterback, but Brock Purdy didn't play amazing in the Super Bowl. He didn't play bad. I've defended Purdy a million times, so if a single 49ers fan comes at me and says that I'm a Brock Purdy hater, my God, because all I do is get called a Brock Purdy fanboy. So just leave that out. But again, if Brock Purdy was able to play 5% better, right, 5% better, they win that game. And so you could make the argument in that moment of time, if Shanahan had a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson, a Joe Burrow, a quarterback that was even remotely on the level of Patrick Mahomes, at least peak Mahomes, the 49ers win that Super Bowl. And this has always been my whole thing about calling out Mahomes, where it's like, if we keep saying all these quarterbacks are bad, he beat Jimmy Garoppolo, not in the league, Brock Purdy, who Nick Wright thinks is a terrible quarterback, a bad quarterback, an average quarterback, and Jalen Hurts, who he also thinks is just like an average quarterback, right? And so it's just, it is an interesting question. But now what I will say is this, that I do think Brock Purdy is good enough, he's at a level to be a great quarterback and be a top quarterback and be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. But I do believe that as great of a coach as Shanahan is, he arguably needs to be better and more adaptable. And this is what I really want to show you. Because right now, because that's been the main criticism of Shanahan, that he's too much to his, to his play sheet. He doesn't adapt, whether going into a game plan or within the game, that he's too stringent. And what it really makes me think of, honestly, is Waterboy, where that one evil coach steals the playbook or whatever from, the Fonz, Henry Winkler. And so it's like that guy, like all he does is have that, I think it's like green or something, his playbook. And, he's able to win. And then when they're against, I think they were in the Rose Bowl, or I forget, honestly, Henry Winkler is like, I'm going to do plays that this guy's never seen because he's the real genius. And he was able to then beat, the evil coach. And that's obviously an exaggerated and silly example, but that's kind of what it makes me think of with Shanahan, right? It's why he struggles when he's from behind. It's why he struggles being down in the fourth quarter and all of those things. And I think actually what highlights this, I think is actually perfect. And I'm going to compare this to, Mahomes and Andy Reid. Andy Reid and Mahomes versus Purdy and Shanahan. Because this right here now, right, is intended air yards per pass attempt. Average depth of target, whether completed or not. Okay? So this is really like, in a very blunt measure, it's like, what are you asking your quarterback to do? How far are you looking? What type of plays are you drawing up? Purdy's number 2, and he should be number 1. Anthony Richardson has very bizarre way of playing, and he's either throwing the ball 60 yards down the field or he's throwing the ball in the dirt. So like, you can honestly just remove him, quite frankly, and you can see Brock Purdy is at the top, right? And that's just pass attempts. If we want to, which we'll reduce, and I just want to show you, and then I'll just have both Purdy and Mahomes side by side. But I want you to see that Mahomes is so far down. He's under Will Levis, under Bo Nix, right? Under rookie Caleb Williams, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith, Jaden Daniels, Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow, Daniel Jones. He's at the very bottom, okay? He's averaging 5.6 air yards per attempt. I mean, that's pretty wild when you think about it. And you can say, well, it's because he has no one to throw to. That's fair. But that's the genius of Andy Reid, right? So now show only selected levels. And so now we got these two. 9.5, 5.6. Okay, and that's pass attempts. If we want to do per completions, 8.9, 3.8. So now that's just like actual completions. We're not even saying pass attempts because, again, in theory, I could be the quarterback right now and I could just throw the ball 30 times to nobody, but throw the ball 40 yards down the field, and it's like, look what I'm doing, right? And my intended air yards are 40. It's like, well, that's kind of meaningless. Like, what about actual completions, right? We can see now actual completions, 8.9, 3.8, right? Completed air yards per completion, yards the ball traveled in the air past the line of scrimmage prior to a completion. So again, what this signals to me more than anything, and then look, this is also what I like. Yards after catch per completion. 4.5. Oh, sorry, you can't see that. Is there a way for me to... Sorry, it's a little bit harder to get. Okay. This is Patrick Mahomes. 7.1. So he's at the bottom for air yards, average depth of target, but at the top for yards after catch. Whereas Brock Purdy is at the top for average depth of target, but near the bottom for yards after catch. So that signals to me more coaching than anything. This is the genius of Andy Reid. This is why Andy Reid, when Patrick Mahomes is still having really bad numbers, statistically not playing good at all, and they have a million offensive weapons going in and out of the lineup, right? Rasheed Rice, Hollywood Brown, all of them going down, and yet they're still able to get production. They're still able to win games. This is what this gets reduced down to more than anything, from my viewpoint. Is this right here? And so again, that's actually on Shanahan. I don't put that on Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is at the mercy of this. He's at the mercy of what his coach is asking him to do. The game plan, the scheming to get more yards after catch, to get him easier pass attempts, to to wide receivers who aren't there, who he doesn't have right now, because he doesn't have great wide receivers. He doesn't. So if he doesn't have great wide receivers, and neither does Patrick Mahomes, and yet we say that Patrick Mahomes is a better quarterback, which is true, why are they asking Brock Purdy to do more than Patrick Mahomes? Why is the better coach asking his better quarterback to do less than Brock Purdy? You're not doing enough to put Brock Purdy in a position to succeed. So I actually do blame Shanahan for that matter. It's not to say that Shanahan isn't a great coach. It's not to say that what Nick is saying is wrong in terms of who would you move on, if you had to pick to move on from someone, who would you move on from, Shanahan or Purdy, right? Like, it is an interesting question, right? If we were to kind of start from scratch, are more people going to pick Purdy or Shanahan to be their coach or quarterback? Because I do think Shanahan's an unbelievable coach. But does he need to continue to evolve and grow as a coach? Does he need to put his players in a better position? Does he need to be able to adapt the game plan depending on who's in the lineup, who they're playing, what is the game plan? Because again, this signals pretty wild. To be so low in yards after catch relative to obviously what Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are able to do, and then, over double, hold on, I'm going to read it the exact way. Completed air yards per pass attempt. Air yards on completed passes per pass attempt. Doubling that? I mean, it's kind of crazy. And again, it is interesting whether you want to do completed or intended. Because again, like I said, if I throw the ball 20 times in a game and I throw the ball 30 yards down the field to nobody, well, like, my air yards would be through the roof. And it doesn't, so, but it's still, that's why I like to look at both. And they still line up, because obviously no quarterback is just throwing the ball down the field, right? Unless you're Anthony Richardson, apparently, which is why his is so high. He is an outlier in that regard for sure. But Patrick Mahomes is at the bottom, at the way bottom, and that's not a shot at Patrick Mahomes. It does ruin and pop this bubble that Patrick Mahomes is carrying this team. No, it's defense and genius coaching that's carrying this team. And strategic play by Patrick Mahomes. It's not to say that Patrick Mahomes is being carried. I'm not saying that either. But it's how Patrick Mahomes cannot be playing so great by putting up bad numbers, turning the ball over, not have any weapons, and yet still win some games. Whereas this is what you have with Brock Purdy and the 49ers. So, more pressure on Purdy or Shanahan, it depends on whether or not you think if Purdy's a great quarterback or not. That's the question. Because is it possible that people reach the conclusion that Purdy's actually a great quarterback? He's a top quarterback. He's limited by Shanahan. Because people say that, oh, Shanahan didn't win until he got Jimmy Garoppolo or Purdy. That without those quarterbacks, he was nothing. Or without Christian McCaffrey, right? He's got like a losing record or whatever, whatever it may be. It's a completely average thing. So, I don't know. Again, and I'm not here to say that Shanahan's not a great coach. That's not my point. And sometimes it is not fair to compare it to Andy Reid, who is a mastermind, right? Who is a genius, who is absolutely brilliant. I know Patrick Mahomes fans like to try to downplay his level of genius, but right there, what I just showed you is proof of Andy Reid's genius and understanding and adaptability. So, because that's not on Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes isn't making those decisions like that. That's Andy Reid's game plan and play calling and play design. So yeah, more pressure on Purdy or Shanahan. The answer is it depends on how good of a quarterback you think Brock Purdy is. If you've reached the conclusion that Brock Purdy is a great quarterback, no question about it, then the pressure is on Shanahan. If you think that Purdy isn't that good of a quarterback and is still on this fringe, then there's pressure on him. I know Brew took the financial route because, yes, technically, if we're talking about money, then there's always pressure on the quarterback. No matter the situation, there's always going to be pressure on the quarterback to keep playing and playing at a high level. They're not going to get the benefit of the doubt when they don't get paid yet. So yes, if we're going to look at a financial perspective, then yes, there's plenty of pressure. But I'm looking at this more from let's just act like both these guys are already got their money, right? Put the money aside. Who do we think is more responsible for the lack of production on this field? Come time games. And Purdy absolutely played bad at times, no doubt. But he's also played really well as well. So we can't just highlight his failures and minimize his successes. So it's interesting. I'm actually really, really curious what 49ers fans think about this, right? This whole idea of Shanahan or Purdy. If you had to pick, this is actually my question for you. And and obviously feel free to comment on everything else that I just said. But feel free to comment. I really want to know really want to know your opinion on this. If you had to pick between Shanahan and Purdy, who would you pick? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.